Hello everyone, myself Ranjit Kesi, working as an assistant professor at Department of CSE, MIT Mysore. In today's session, we will discuss about an exec function. So what exactly an exec function is, and what are the different forms of an exec function, and what is the impact of this exec functions on any currently running process. So that is all the topic to be discussed for today's session. So before going to that, we are quite aware what exactly the function which has been used to create a new process. That is, we make use of a function called fork, with the help of which a new process can be created. So fork is an API which has been used to create a new process. So any process can create a more number of a child process, and that depends upon the count defined by the constant called child max. So child max is a constant which defines what is the maximum number of child process any process can have at any point of time. If the particular process really requires more number of a process to be created, it requires any currently running process to be terminated for that particular need. And we got to know the different forms of an fork function, that is an fork and then a v fork. So v fork is also used to create a new child process, but only difference is when a v fork has been executed, the newly created child process will actually execute a new program, isn't it? That is what exactly we learnt during the discussion of an fork function. That is, when a process creates a new process, let me call this P1 as a new process using v fork, which is another variant of an fork function. That is, at that instance, the newly created child process will not be executing the same set of an instruction as that of a parent process. So that is, any newly created child process will not copy or will not run the same program unlike of its parent process. That is only when a new child process is being created in the form of v fork. Okay, so what exactly happens is the newly created child process will execute a function called exec. So by default it will execute a function called exec, with the help of which a new program will be loaded to its memory, and this newly created child process will be executing that new program loaded by this exec API. So exec is an API with the help of which any currently running process, its program memory will be replaced by a new program. That's the one main common definition for an exec function. That is, exec has been used to load a new program for a currently running process. So at any point of time, if our process or any new child process wish to execute a different program unlike of its parent program, parent process program, at that instance it is very much sufficient if you execute an API called exec. So exec is an API which has been used to load a new program for a currently running process. And we all got aware what exactly this particular different identifiers with respect to process, isn't it? Each one of a process, as and when it is being created, it will be assigned with a common identifier, that is PID. So as and when a new process is being created, each one of the process will be assigned with an unique identifier that we call it as an process identifier. And for each and every process, it will have a parent process. For example, if I consider this as a process, for this process, this will be the parent process, and it will have a parent process ID same time. Okay, and we got to know there are different identifiers same time to recognize or to identify a particular process in a system, isn't it? So whenever we execute this exec API, we got to know that the program memory of an process will be swapped with a new program, isn't it? But the process identifier will not be changed, and the process identifier of that process will remain the same itself even though the new program has been loaded for its execution. So just remember, that is, when an exec API has been executed, a new program will be loaded for its execution. That is, the program memory of this process will be swapped with a new program, and the identifier of the process will not be altered. That is, the identifier will remain one and the same. Okay, that is the major difference or major consequences what exactly happens when an exec API is being executed. Okay, and we'll learn more about what is the different forms of an exec function and what is the way in which exec functions can be called and what is the major differences amongst that different variants of an exec forms in today's session. Yes. So here the exec function, so whenever a process executes an exec function, what actually happens is, whenever the exec has been executed, the process is completely replaced by the new program, and the new program will start with its execution from its main function. That is, the newly loaded program, it will be executed from the main function. That is what exactly happens whenever a process executes an exec function. And things must be remembered that the process identifier of a currently running process will not be altered, but only these factors will be differed from its earlier existence. That is, the text, the data and heap and stack segment of that particular process will be swapped with the new information that is been passed through the exec API, that these things will be altered, and the program memory of the currently running process will be swapped with the new program. That is what exactly we can observe when an exec function is been executed. And there exist 6 different forms of an exec function, that is exec-L, exec-V, exec-LE, exec-VE, exec-LP and exec-VP. So these are the different forms of an exec function which are being used for its appropriate usage, where exactly all these particular 6 different exec forms are with a common objective, that is to swap a program memory of a currently running process whenever it has been executed. But only thing is, it actually differs in the context of the arguments that is been passed for this exec API. We will learn more on this. What is the exec different forms, its function prototype, and what is the major difference amongst these particular exec forms will be discussed now about this exec function. Well, the prototype for the 6 different exec forms are something like this. Yes, these are the 6 different forms of exec function. So this exec can be mentioned as exec L, exec V, exec LE, exec VE, exec LP and exec VP. So these are the 6 different forms of an exec function, and the basic objective of all these exec forms is very clear. That is, whenever API is been executed by any currently running process, the program memory of that particular process will be replaced by a new program. Okay, and we need to mention which particular program that needs to be replaced for the currently running process, isn't it? So that will be passed through this particular exec API arguments. So let us know more about what is the different arguments that exactly this exec API will take, and how exactly these 6 different exec forms can be distinguished, and the major differences amongst these. So first and foremost, the first major difference with the 6 different exec forms is the first 4 exec forms will take path name as the first argument, and the last 2 exec forms, that is exec LP and exec VP, will take file name as an argument. So that is, we got to know whenever exec API has been executed, it will load a new program, isn't it? And that new program will be specified in the very first argument of all these exec forms. That is, the very first argument will clearly specify which particular program that needs to be replaced for the currently running process program memory. Okay, so it means to say that the file path name, the file which has been mentioned over here in the very first argument, will be replaced as the program memory of a currently running process. Okay, and these 6 different exec forms can be classified based upon the very first argument, that is exec L, exec V, exec LE and exec V will take file path name as the very first argument, and last 2, that is exec LP and exec VP, will consider file name as an argument. For example, in the very first argument, if the file name consists of an forward slash, it means to say that file path name is been specified. If not the case, if the directly executable file has been mentioned, at that instant it will check the bin slash that particular file path folder where exactly the directly executable files will be searched for its execution. That is the first major difference with the 6 different forms of an exec function. Then the second major difference is exec L, exec LE and exec LP actually take the arguments in the list form. That is, the any different number of an arguments you would like to specify for that newly running program, we can pass that particular arguments in the form of a list. That is, the first argument, then the second argument, like that it goes on. So any number of an arguments that needs to be passed for the program can be put in the same line. Okay, where in case of an exec V, exec VE and exec VP, it takes the arguments in the form of an vector, where exactly all the different arguments that needs to be passed for the program will be put into the same array, and that particular array will be passed as the second argument. That is how we can able to distinguish the 6 different forms of an exec function. That is, exec L, exec LE and exec LP will take arguments in forms of a list, and exec V, exec VE and exec VP will take the arguments in the form of an vector. And last major difference with respect to this 6 different exec forms is this exec LE and exec VE. So these 2 different forms of an exec function will have one more extra argument. That extra argument is nothing but an environment variable, an array called environment variable will be passed with this 2 different forms of an exec function, that is exec LE and exec VE, where exactly the environment variables can also be passed in the same particular argument list itself, that is the last argument, will actually represents the environment variable, and that array will be passed in the third argument of this particular exec form. And that is the third major difference with respect to the exec 6 different forms of an exec function, where in case of the other 4 different exec forms will actually need to follow the same old protocol for the passing of an environment variables, where in case of exec L and exec V will take this one more will have one more argument which will actually take the environment variables in the same particular argument section itself. That is how this set of 6 different exec functions can be distinguished based upon the protocol. Here the 6 different exec functions can be clearly classified based upon 3 major differences. That is, the first major difference is the first 4 of exec forms will take file path name as an argument, and the last 2 exec forms will take file name as an very first argument. Okay, and the second major difference is exec L, exec LE and exec LP will be the arguments will be passed in form of an list form, where in case of an exec V and exec VP, the arguments can be passed in terms of an vector, and that is the second major difference. And the third major difference is exec LE and exec V will have one more extra argument, with the help of which the environment variables can be passed for the program in execution. Okay. So this is all about the exec function, and it is also another major topic to be studied, and most frequently asked question in your previous year question papers of the course Unix system programming. And that's it for this particular module. Thank you.